Our next speaker has been leading by example in inclusive technology for decades. Gloria Bell is a seasoned leader, entrepreneur, and advocate for equity in tech, founder of Women in Tech Summit and the Inspiring Tech Foundation, and board president of Startup Leaders. She has empowered women, non-binary, and underrepresented technologists across communities. Please welcome Gloria Bell.
So, we good? Am I on? Okay. I actually want to start out by thanking the last panel. First of all, as someone who has spent the last 20 plus years in entrepreneurship and technology and innovation, they were very inspiring, but they also did an amazing job of setting up my talk. So I want to say thank you to them. My name is Gloria Bell. You got my very, very gracious introduction, but just to give you a little insight on why I'm here to talk to you today about empathy as infrastructure, depending on what hour of the day it is, will depend on which hat I am wearing. So my brand new, as of last week, day job is I am the Director of Operations at Zip Code Wilmington. We are a coding academy, changing lives by helping individuals proceed on new career paths. I am also the board president at Startup Leaders. You may have formerly heard of us as Philly Startup Leaders. We are the nation's largest entrepreneur support and resource organization, founded right here in Philly 18 years ago, and we are now a global organization. And I am also the founder of the Women in Tech Summit and the Inspiring Tech Foundation. So all of those things to say, I have spent most of the last over 20 years working on equity, inclusion, belonging, diversity, and overall fairness in the tech industry and in entrepreneurship and innovation. So I want to start by asking all of you just really quickly, how many in the room are technologists? Okay, fair number. How many of you work in tech organizations in some other role? Product owner, project manager, designer? Okay, another fair number of you. How many of you have some kind of responsibility for choosing the technology your organization uses? Okay, a whole lot more hands. And how many of you use technology? Okay, pretty much every hand. So the reason I ask you that question is because what we're going to talk about today is really, I want to get across the message. I'm not just talking to the technologists in the room, and I'm not just talking to the designers and the product owners and the project managers. I'm talking to all of you because as users of technology, as consumers of technology, we all have a responsibility. If we're not building it, we have input on what gets built. So all of this really applies to everyone. So I want to start with one thought. We have built years, decades now, since we had the first computers, building faster systems, sleeker products. Everybody's looking at their iPhone right now, right? When we talk about sleeker products. Smarter algorithms to help us do all of these things that we don't want to do. But all too often, the people that we are building for are an afterthought. The comment that was just made in the last panel about the founders that fall in love with their products and not the problem, that is a pervasive issue. We start with the problem and then we fall in love with what we're building. But my premise for you is empathy is not a soft skill. It's It's what we hear over and over again. Anything having to do with feelings is a soft skill. But empathy is not a soft skill. Empathy can be an integral part of your infrastructure. It can be a core system that determines whether the tech that we are building is good for everyone. So how do we get there? First of all, we need to define what empathy as an infrastructure is. So empathy as an infrastructure is not just feeling with others or feeling about others, but it is intentionally, consciously, consistently building with them in mind. So let's see here. We're a little bit ahead of, there we go. So empathy as infrastructure is a set of processes, metrics, and rituals that are embedding care, fairness, and inclusion into our design, into our ideas, and into how we hire and how we test. So we're going to talk about that. Why does it matter? How many of you have ever tried to use a piece of technology that you ran into a difficulty with? Okay, a lot of you. For me, one of the biggest ones is I have 2 sons that are video gamers. My partner loves to play video games. I can't play video games because of the motion, the lights, and the sound. I have vertigo. The minute I turn on a video game, my vertigo is activated. How many video game designers are thinking about that when they think about all the sounds, the noise, the way the lights flash, all of those kinds of things? So this is what we're talking about when we talk about most teams treat empathy, they treat equity, they treat inclusion as an optional. It's a nice to have. We're gonna build this really cool thing, and if we can include those things that make sure everyone can use it, well, great. But if we can't, that's okay. We have a customer base. But what happens when that's your thought process, when empathy is not ingrained into your infrastructure, in your design, in your innovation, in your build, it results in inequalities. We get biased algorithms that are giving us results that don't include every lived experience. We are getting exclusionary policies, benefits that are set up for a company that don't take everyone's lived experience or expression of themselves into consideration. And we get a culture that is grounded in who survives, instead of the question of, is everybody thriving? So some examples of these things that can happen. Most of you have probably heard about this in the news over the last couple of years. Facial recognition systems that don't recognize half of our world's faces because they don't recognize faces of people of color or of women. Accessibility features that get added after a product's already launched instead of being included in the design from the very beginning. And we get teams that celebrate innovation and finances and speed to ship instead of celebrating belonging. Is everybody on the team a valued voice? So, what we end up with is this problem. But how we solve this problem is that empathy is the missing infrastructure connecting our intention to our outcomes. The reality is most technologists, most founders, most people building products are not going into what they do intentionally excluding people. But it's an afterthought instead of part of the process. But when it becomes part of the process, this is what we have. We have products that are equitable. We have fair policies, and we have inclusive cultures. So, how do we get from feeling to framework? From talking about empathy as just something we feel to it actually being a part of how we operate intentionally and without having to leave anyone out? One, we have to take it from being an individual responsibility to an institutional part of our operations. And we're going to talk about how, because these are really big ideas and they're like, well, yes, of course, this should happen. But it's a lot harder than it can seem sometimes. So what do? We have some core components of empathy systems. We start with listening systems. We are building constant feedback so that we always know where we are in the process. We're building inclusive user research. When we're going out doing research about our product or our idea, we're being very conscious and very considerate of who are we talking to. And the most important question that is asked repeatedly at multiple points, preferably in every one of your daily sprint reviews and stand-ups, is who are we not hearing from? We have to make sure we're hearing from everyone. Another way that we make it an institutional part of what we do is we have decision checklists. So these checklists actually build empathy gates into how we operate. And the way we do that is before every decision is finalized, we ask some questions. We ask who benefits? Who could be harmed? We talk a lot about who benefits. We don't talk a lot about who can be harmed. And the most important question is, how will we know? How are we going to know who's benefiting and who's being harmed? And how do we build that into our process? How do we build that into our feedback that we're getting? How do we build it into reviews of how we're going through the process? One of the things that's really important also is including inclusive rituals, because the reality is that diverse, inclusive teams build diverse, inclusive products. If your team is not diverse and is not inclusive, there are voices that are missing that could be crucial to what you're building. So, real simple way to make sure that you have inclusive rituals. When you have a meeting, so when all of you go into a meeting, how normal is it for one or two people to lead the meetings? Pretty normal. What if you rotated meeting roles? Everybody at the meeting now has a responsibility, and every voice at the table gets heard. Very, very simple change, but it can make a huge impact. How many of you have been on a Zoom call and there's this, you've got the little Brady Bunch up there, and there's one person, one little square that you almost never hear from? You're missing a critical voice. So rotating meeting roles makes sure everybody gets heard from, everybody is recognized. Having constant, consistent feedback loops. That lets you embed bias checks in your Q&A, so your quality assurance, all of your quality checks, and in your user testing cycles. When your feedback loops aren't just things that happen at the design phase and at the launch phase, but they're happening throughout your entire process, you're making sure that you're not getting too far down the path with a problem. And lightweight audits. So the reason we really focus on these being lightweight audits is because we want to make sure the process is still moving along, that we're not creating roadblocks. All we're creating is stopping and breathing and thinking points. So if you're doing lightweight audits, you're getting regular empathy checks throughout your process, throughout your meetings, throughout your hiring. If you institute these as a regular part of sprint reviews, as a regular part of milestones, then you're making sure that you're doing those check-ins on a regular basis. Okay, I know this is all kind of deep information. Is everybody with me? All right, awesome. So, this is what we get when we have empathy in action. We get fairness, we get inclusion, and bottom line, we get better products, and better products lead to better revenues, and then you make the investors that were up here really happy. So, how do we operationalize empathy? This is where it gets, we have to break everything we do in operations down to its components. So in hiring and onboarding, empathy shows up by who's at the table. And I'm talking both sides of the table. You can't just be looking at inclusion and diversity in your interviewees. You need to be looking at in your interviewers as well. Are you making sure all voices are represented? And when I talk about diversity at that table, I'm not just talking about gender. I'm not just talking about race. I'm not just talking about skill ability. I am talking about job title, position level. Wouldn't it make more sense if you want to bring on a hire who really is a right fit and is going to do the best job for your team, if everyone who is going to interact and work with that individual is a part of the hiring process? I was just a part of a hiring process where even the two admins that report to me were part of the hiring process. That was huge. They have to work with me daily. They are the employees who actually work with me the closest. They got to have a say in the interviewing and the hiring process. So, diverse panels, diverse people in the room when you're hiring and when you're onboarding. In your design and development, how many of you know what the term edge case means? Okay, handful. Most of my technologists know what it is. So the edge case, those are the people when you are doing research or who are using your product, that you have the people in the middle who are the ones who are using it exactly the way you expected to. The edge cases are the ones maybe using it a little different. Maybe they're the ones having the difficulty with it. So what's really important when you're doing design and development, you're doing your user research and you're having people doing testing, that you don't treat those edge cases as exceptions, treat them as signals. What is that edge case telling you about your product? What is it telling you about the software? So I'm gonna go on a little tangent here and tell you about a startup that I mentored a few years ago, and was incredibly fortunate because the founders were the kind of people that they built empathy in from day one because that's who they were. So they didn't think to do it any other way. One of the things that they did was really looking at their edge cases and paying attention to the data that they were getting back from that. What they ended up discovering was they had people using their product in a way that they had not expected. And what ended up happening is, with a few minor tweaks to really address the way those people, the edge cases, were using those products, they ended up with a whole different product line. They now had 2 products going to market. They now doubled their revenue because they paid attention to their edge cases. They paid attention to those as signals. In your governance and metrics, the things we all track, we track KPIs, key performance indicators, we track ROI, return on investment, we track our financials, we track how quickly we're getting something to market. What if we were tracking inclusion and belonging just as closely? It is a huge metric to tell you where you may go. And the other thing is with culture. A culture that has empathy as part of its infrastructure can lead to empathy-driven relationship, empathy-driven leadership. And what empathy-driven leadership looks like is people who are equipped, trained, encouraged, and even measured by whether or not they will have brave conversations in environments of psychological safety. That is what you want from a leader. You want someone who's willing to have a brave conversation. The other thing when you're talking about culture is you build in an assumption of complexity. Because we are complex as human beings. We are complex in more ways than we could stand up here and list in the time that I have. But if we're always assuming complexity, then we're always looking for those opportunities to embed empathy, to embed inclusion, to embed belonging. So, a lot of things we should do. How do we do it? One of the things that we do is we have a checklist that is addressed at every milestone and absolutely before launch. And in that checklist, we are asking who might be unintentionally excluded. Not just who might be excluded, but who might be unintentionally excluded. Whose lived experience is missing from this table? Who do we need to be including to make sure that we're including everyone's lived experiences? And for me, this is one of the most important ones. How are we measuring fairness post-launch? Because it's real easy to get into the how many we sold and how much money we made and what do we need to build, what's the next add-on and are we including metrics about fairness in that as well? We have templates. Nothing is left to chance. And we're always making equal comparisons by building templates for our feedback loops, for those mini audits that we talked about. We are looking at things in the same way to make sure that we are always doing apples to apples comparisons so that we can identify those signals from those edge cases, so that we can identify the gaps. So, I could talk for another 2 or 3 hours about how to actually do this. It is both complex and really easy. And I am happy at any point if any of you want to sit down and talk about your specific situations and how to institutionalize empathy into your frameworks. My contact information will be available. Please reach out to me because I know I'm probably leaving you with more questions than answers at the moment. But for right now, this is what we measure. And here's my call to action to you. When we treat empathy as infrastructure, when it is operationalized into everything that we do, equity stops being someone's side project. That one developer who's always raising their hand and saying, hey, we're forgetting this. We're forgetting this group. We're forgetting this person. It stops being that, and it becomes everyone's shared responsibility. so it doesn't get put to the side. It doesn't get forgotten when you're trying to institute speed. The other thing is, empathy is not about being nice. It's about building systems that work for everyone. Whether that's how your organization operates, whether it's the product that you're putting out into the world. We should always be making our best efforts to build for everyone. Not because it's nice, not because it's the right thing to do, because it is both of those things. But it's also just darn good business. There are statistics repeatedly that prove diverse teams that have inclusion and belonging built into their operation, they make more money. It's good business. So, empathy isn't soft, it's structural. And structural scales. It lets you build better products, bigger programs, reach more people, and do more good in the world. So, thank you all very much.